back for another chapter on the build on the S10. As you can see, you got a couple 8.8 sitting here in the floor. These are both Explorer 373, 31 spline, the whole 9 yards, the good stuff that everybody wants for the swap. So I'm going to show you how we narrow the housings, and this is going to be specifically geared to the people that don't have a rear end fixture or anything like that. We're going to do it just about as DIY as it can get. So follow along. As you can see, the pinion, the flange is already off of it, the cover's already off of it, we're draining the fluid out of it, the brakes are off, all that good stuff. So we're going to go ahead and finish disassembling this rear end and get it ready to be cut down. Okay, so the first thing I did as far as getting this thing apart, and now I'm going to cover everything here, just in case somebody who hadn't ever taken one of these apart before, just so you'll know how to do it. So the first thing you got to do to get the axles out is you got to take this bolt out of the carrier that holds the cross pin in place. Now, if this rear end or the one you're working on had never been apart, it's going to have Loctite on it and the bolt's going to be really tight. I would highly suggest getting a 6-point wrench or a socket on there because you will undoubtedly strip this out. And it is 8mm, by the way. So got that out. We're going to roll the rear end around and get the cross pin out. If you get lucky and the pin is sticking up a little bit like this one is, you can get a screwdriver and just lift the pin out, put the screwdriver through the hole, pick it up like so, and then there it is. Now what you want to look for if the rear end is in good shape or not, these pins will have galled marks on them right here where the spider gear has, it's not galled up too bad. A lot of the times you can polish it down, and the way you know is when you go to take this thing out, it'll give you a hard time trying to come out. So this particular one's in really good shape, and we're going to roll with this. Take this axle, and now you can push the axle in a little bit. Okay, so now you take a pair of needle nose pliers, and you're going to use them on the C-clip like this to push the C-clip down and just let it fall down into the case. Okay, there it is. You hear it fall down in the case. Now the axle will come out. Do the same thing for the other side. Remember, these axles, you have to keep the axle held in so you can get the C-clip out, because sometimes the C-clip will sit just far enough inside where it won't fall out. Far enough inside the spider gear where it won't fall out. There's another one. Okay, and it just clanked down in the bottom of the carrier there. And there we go. Okay, so as you can see, these axles are substantially different in length, which is the whole purpose of this video, is to explain to you what we're going to do to make this rear end fit an S10. Long story short, we're going to use 2 short axles to make this rear end centered or close to it and make it fit the S10. So we're on to the next part. We're going to take the carrier out and we're going to start cutting these brackets off and taking some measurements. Okay, so taking the differential, the main caps off of it, you should probably mark them to know which side is which and to know which side points out. Usually the arrows on the tops of the caps point to the outside. The other way you can tell is by where the chamfer is machined into the cap. The chamfer, they can only cut the chamfer towards the inside or towards the gears, so that chamfer is always going to point towards the inside. Alright, so now it's time to get the differential, or to get the carrier out of there. One of the things you want to watch for is when you take this thing out, that the shims that come out, they're going to be different thicknesses, and you want to know which one's which. If you get them mixed up when you put it back together, it's going to change the backlash in the gears, which is kind of hard to hear in the video, but and every once in a while you get lucky and you can pick them up like that. Now you want to pick the C-clips up that you knocked down in there earlier, throw them in your parts box. Okay, so the rear end's all disassembled now, and it's about time to cut all these brackets off of it. So we're going to cut every single bracket off of it, spring perches and everything. And then we're going to grind it down nice and clean and cut the long side down to match the short side, which is what you got to do to put it in the S10. All right, so generally speaking, the way I do this is I rough cut the bracket off there to make sure and stay plenty far away from the tube. And then after I knock the major part of the bracket off there, I'll go back and trim it up a little bit further so I don't have to grind quite so much. And like I said, the only reason I do that is just to keep from gouging the tube with the plasma cutter. The other thing is be sure and keep a decent sized hammer handy so you can knock some of these things off of there if you start getting close and you miss a little spot. Alright, last but not least, it's time to start the grinding part, which is not my favorite part of this. So alright, seems the camera quit at some point, so I don't know how much of that I got, but the rear end is all, the brackets are all removed, everything's ground down, and then I hit it with the 40 grit flap wheel on the DeWalt. So now we're going to go ahead and set this thing up and get some measurements done so we can cut the long side down. Now, I'm not going to do this exactly like we normally would if we were just cutting a normal, or just shortening a normal rear end down. Reason being is I have two of these rear ends, and one of them I need to make into a long rear end that uses two long axles, and one into a short rear end that uses two short axles. So the only real difference there is going to be the way I have to line these studs up, or line the flanges up. So we're going to go ahead and get it cut for that. The length, the part that you're going to cut out, or the amount you're going to shorten it, is 3 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and get this lined up for that and show you how we do it. Okay, we're finally getting somewhere. Time to cut down the axle tube and get it welded back together. Okay, time to set it over on stands, get it clamped up, let's weld it together. Okay, I almost forgot, it's time for my patented axle bearing removal process. only to be seen here on YouTube. Okay, check it out. I got the rear end housing cut. It's ready to go back together. I cut an inch out of this housing and moved the end closer in. So the way we lined it up, it's the DIY way. And the reason for doing it this way this time is because it's the DIY channel. It's the way that most anybody would have access to do it, so that's how we're gonna do it now. So anyways, I got it clamped up. I got the edges lined up with the other side the way it's supposed to be done. So I'm gonna go ahead and tack it together. Okay, so now it's time to get the leaf spring brackets ready to go. What you're going to see here is these particular leaf spring brackets, and I think I mentioned it in one of the other videos. They're set up where they can be used on 3-inch or 3 1/4 inch axle tubes, and the way they do that is by putting those tabs in there. So what we got to do in this case is go in there and grind those tabs out so they sit flush on the axle tube. Now, I am all about using the best stuff that you can possibly get, and I kind of stumbled upon these. These parts are nice, and they're probably some of the cheapest ones I found on Amazon. So I'm going to include a link in the description for these particular ones. You can't beat them. They come with the U-bolts. They come with the plates that go on the bottom of the springs and everything. And in this particular case, I put 5/8 U-bolts in it, so it's got giant U-bolts in there that locate the rear end on the springs. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and cut these, or grind these tabs out of here right now. Okay, here's the math on the rear end housing on how I'm gonna locate the brackets. Right here, you're going to see that the overall length of the rear end housing from flange to flange, 48 7/8. The center line of the springs, 38 3/8, leaves 10 1/2 total. Divided by 2 leaves 5 1/4 to the center of the leaf spring brackets. Now, I want to know also what the edge of the leaf spring bracket is, the outer edge. So the leaf spring brackets are 2 1/2 inches wide, so 5 1/4 minus that 1 1/4. Leaves me with 4 inches to the outer edge of the leaf spring bracket. Now we're going to go ahead and put them on the housing. Alright, so now the leaf spring brackets are tacked in place. They are oriented from the cover flange or from the pinion flange, whichever. I usually use the cover flange because it's machined, and then the nose of the pinion isn't always machined. And if you still have the seal in it, you can't get to it anyways. So, if you learn anything from any of these videos, make sure you tack it first, measure it again, and compare it to the truck or your vehicle. Make sure that it's right. You don't want to do what I did and have to cut it back off, like you saw in Steven's video. Anyways, this thing is ready to weld together now, completely. Okay, that's the end of the video in regards to the fabrication, the welding, and everything else, getting the 8.8 ready to go in the S10. The next video we're going to cover is the assembly and setup of the gears going into the 8.8. So once again, thanks everybody for stopping by. I sure appreciate it. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. Also, big shout out to all the new subscribers that came over here by way of Stephen Cox's channel. Thanks again, guys. I appreciate it and hope to see you in the next one.